Hello, and welcome to the 8th and final episode of Madaba Mondays. I'm your host, Paul Fischer, from the Cultural Antiquities Task Force in the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs at the U.S. Department of State. The Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, or ECA, works to build friendly, peaceful relations between the people of the United States and the people of other countries through academic, cultural, sports, and professional exchanges, as well as public-private partnerships. ECA has many different exchange programs. Some you may have heard of before, like the Fulbright program, and others you may not have heard of, like the International Visitor Leadership Program or the Middle East Partnership Initiative. The Fulbright program offers international educational and cultural exchange programs for passionate and accomplished students, scholars, artists, teachers, and professionals of all backgrounds to study, teach, or pursue important research and professional projects. Through short-term visits, the International Visitor Leadership Program, or IVLP, offers the opportunity for current and emerging foreign leaders in a variety of fields to experience the United States. Nizar al-Adarbeh is an IVLP alumni. He joins us today. Similarly, the Middle East Partnership Initiative, or Mepi, supports governments and their citizens to achieve shared political, economic, and stability objectives. Renad Qurani participated in the Mepi program, and she joins us today. And Badie Twal from Madaba also participated in the Mepi program and is here with us too. In each episode of Madaba Mondays, we've investigated some element of the One Place, Many Stories 3D model, audio tour, and storytelling project that you can explore for yourself. A link to the project is in the description of this video. Since 2019, the Cultural Antiquities Task Force has supported inventory and storage upgrades at the Madaba Regional Archaeological Museum in collaboration with the Jordanian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities and Gannon University. However, as the realities of the COVID-19 pandemic set in, and it became clear that the US-based archaeological team would not be able to travel, we had to put the inventory project on hold. At the same time, we also recognize that those in the local community who are dependent on tourism revenue for their livelihoods were adversely affected by the global freeze on travel. Madaba is home to the Byzantine Church of St. George, which houses the famous Madaba map, a mosaic map of the Holy Land. International and domestic tourists alike are also drawn to Madaba's many archaeological and historical sites, along with the museum. In response, the project partners pioneered a novel program of training, professional development, and virtual tours of the Heritage Trail in downtown Madaba. The US-based NGO, SciArc, conducted a remote training on photogrammetry and 3D modeling for 3 young Jordanians from the American University of Madaba. These students learned by doing. SciArc trained them on how to use the photogrammetry equipment, and they in turn went out and documented the Heritage Trail, archaeological parks, and St. George's Church. SciArc then took this documentation and turned it into 3D models. At the same time, the State Department's Office of English Language Programs provided English language classes to 3 Jordanian tour guides. And lastly, another US NGO, Story Center, helped 6 Madaba residents, 3 men and 3 women, to tell their stories about how their contemporary lives relate to this ancient place. Now, in English or Arabic, you can explore Madaba for yourself, scrolling through the archaeological parks and church, accompanied by an in-depth audio tour and these stories of people who call Madaba and its living heritage home. Protecting and preserving the living heritage of vibrant communities is critical to not just economic prosperity. Cultural heritage speaks to our identities as Jordanians and Americans, religious and ethnic pluralism and tolerance, and our shared human identity on a planet increasingly at risk from the forces of climate change and man-made disasters. Our community-centered documentation project and virtual tour in Madaba serves as a public education tool, supports the livelihoods of Madaba residents, and provides a digital inventory of the site until the archaeological team can return to complete its work. With that, I'd like to invite Nizar to turn on your camera and unmute your microphone and join us. Welcome, Nizar.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for inviting us for this final episode of Madaba Mondays. It's really a pleasure to join you today.
It's great to have you. I'm so glad this could work out. So to start, could you introduce yourself and the IVLP program you participated in?
Yeah, so currently I'm working as a project management specialist at the USAID office in Amman. But before that, I was the chief of party of USAID Sustainable Cultural Heritage through engagement of local communities project with the American Center of Research in Jordan. And I worked before also with the Ministry of Tourism and the Department of Antiquities and several cross-border cooperation programs with the EU, mainly related to heritage development and tourism. And I worked before with the private sector. I was, of course, so privileged to be selected by the US Embassy and by the Department of State to participate in the IVLP program during my work on AFCP-related projects in Jordan. And that was in 2019. And during that time, the US Embassy and the Department of State, they were focusing on a new program, an outstanding regional one, entitled the Preserving Cultural Heritage and Combating Trafficking of Conflict Antiquities. And the idea behind the program and the main objectives were focusing on how to explore strategies to prevent the destruction, looting, and trafficking of cultural heritage, increase knowledge of US laws and law enforcement mechanisms to prevent smuggling of cultural property into and out of the US, which are key items that we all suffer in the region. And also to provide opportunities for all of us here in the region to have or establish linkages with US-related entities such as museums, auction houses, academic institutions. We visited a large number of these entities for around like six states we have visited, including DC, Washington, and other states as well. And even we had nice meetings with the with the US National Park Service, and even the Pentagon. And even like, I remember a very nice meeting with the district attorney in New York. So to learn about these things and how the practices from the field and the connection with the US, that was marvelous. And also we had the examination of the current US theory and practices and applications of using new technologies and methods for the inventory, control, and documentation.
Wow. Okay, so there's a lot there to unpack. First of all, I want to clarify that the AFCP program that you mentioned, that's the Ambassadors Fund for Cultural Preservation, which is another office and grant program inside of the same office that I work in, inside of the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. And
Exactly.
That's so wonderful that the work that you did with AFCP and the work that you're doing now with SHEP through the American Centers of Oriental Research or Overseas Research in Jordan, it's so wonderful to hear, how this professional exchange that you did through IVLP has sort of, contributed to your work, and that you're, working actively in cultural heritage preservation and protection.
Yeah, honestly, it has a huge benefit to me, and even this is part of how I moved to the USAID now to work on projects related to heritage and development and tourism. That was really instrumental to my career and my work.
Sorry about that. The lights just turned off on me, which happens sometimes. Okay, so now tell me, before you participated in the International Visitor Leadership Program exchange, did you already have a background in cultural heritage preservation and protection?
Yes, of course, because of the nature of my study and background, my bachelor's and master's degree in cultural resources management, and also from my career of working for almost 15 years in heritage management and conservation and development in Jordan, actually, and the Mediterranean region. And We have several cross-border cooperation programs with different Arab and Mediterranean countries, and especially with the US, because here we have the USAID and the state as major donors and supporters for heritage preservation, which helped us a lot. And that was part of the essence how I nurtured and developed my career and knowledge and skills in this field, especially when it comes to technology and how we work on developing our sites, World Heritage Sites Management, and all of these aspects, important aspects related to the better management and utilization and sustainability aspects of these sites. And especially when we talk about better engagement approaches to communities and other stakeholders. So that was really great important contribution to my career, of course.
Now, let's back up for a second. So how did it happen that you were able to participate in the exchange program? Did the embassy reach out to you, or did you apply through the embassy? Walk me through that process?
So honestly, the mechanism that I learned about how they select the process, it's not like you don't have an application and then you apply to the program. It's like an internal US department in coordination with the US Embassy in Amman. They select and nominate participants based on which kind and theme of the IVLP. We have several IVLP participants in Jordan, but some in communication. But for the heritage sector, they have nominated me because of my previous history with the USAID and with the State Department and the AFCP funds in Jordan, and how I contributed to several projects and during my career with the government. So when they select someone to participate, it depends on these integral aspects and the essential things they need for the program. And because my career and curriculum, it matches with the program that I mentioned on illicit trafficking and combating the trafficking of the antiquity. So they needed someone to represent Jordan because this program during 2019, it was about the Arab region. So we had participants from Egypt, Tunisia, Iraq, and other countries. So we together, the EU, so we together contributed to this visit, and in order to have interaction and regional cross cooperation. So that was the core idea of my nomination, and really I was so glad and fortunate to be selected to represent Jordan, and I hope that I did very well, because the idea also is that you come back to your country to spread the knowledge and interact with the institutions relevant to this work. Then this is what I did in my project and with the government, and we are still continuing the work here in cooperation with the embassy and other partners.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, that's why I asked you to join us, because of having participated in this International Visitor Leadership Program, and that you're such a leader in cultural heritage preservation and protection in Jordan. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
And I'm curious, have you stayed in touch with or collaborated with any of your other colleagues from the Middle East and North Africa who also participated in that exchange program?
Yes, indeed, and we have like an informal and a formal network now with all the colleagues who participated. And honestly, we established some like linkages and programs that we have internal visits. However, unfortunately, after the COVID-19 hit internationally, so this hindered us and delayed our plans to have joint programs, because the programs we tried to establish, it was basically like we go and visit, like having an exchange program that focuses on hands-on approach, and to go and meet with the relevant entities, just like what we did with the states. But hopefully we will restart these initiatives again. But we stayed in touch and shared, at least sharing knowledge electronically and having continuous meetings from time to time, and learn about other projects that the other colleagues they are doing in their countries. So we kept communication on, but hopefully we can connect again and do field visits and go and visit each other countries and learn more about this. And maybe also to focus on regional collaboration, because as you know, combating illicit trafficking of antiquity needs more regional integration and cooperation from all the countries, especially when it comes to the borders and international travel.
Well, and that's the focus of the team that I work on. The Cultural Antiquities Task Force is devoted to protecting cultural heritage from these threats of theft and looting and trafficking, and also climate change and destruction. And
Exactly.
I'm so delighted to hear that you and your international partners and colleagues from around the Middle East and North Africa have continued to stay in touch, COVID notwithstanding. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering, among the projects that you've worked on in the past, have you been able to do anything in Madaba?
Yeah, yes, of course. So Madaba is dear to my heart, actually. And I was lucky that we have worked with Dr. Douglas Clark and Dr. Susan as well from Ghana University, actually on what we call Madaba Regional Archaeological Museum project. So at SHEP, we have funded part of the work that they did, the team with the Department of Antiquities. And basically, we were focusing on what we call the Western Park of Madaba, or the Burned Palace. So we worked on how to do a rehabilitation project with the idea that this location will in the future host and accommodate the new archaeological museum of Madaba. And we worked on this project in cooperation with the local communities and all relevant stakeholders, especially the municipality. And I believe this was one of the great success stories of community engagement in Jordan, and there even work with the Madaba University as well. And all of this kind of project, it had like interactive work, awareness, education, transfer of knowledge, using technology, and working even on documenting the objects in the storage and the warehouses in Madaba. So I believe that this kind of project is like a catalyst and enabler for continuing the protection of the archaeological sites, but most importantly on having a meaningful kind of development and protection, because I always say that we shouldn't only focus on conservation just for the conservation per se, but rather on how we benefit from these cultural heritage as a resource for the community development aspects. And this is what is important in what we do in general in heritage development. And I think what the colleagues are doing in this project, and also in the other side from the US Embassy support through AFCP as well, together we have worked together to support and push the project to continue working with the government and the local community. And I believe through this experience, we have reached a very good level of development in Madaba, and on continuing the work that one day, inshallah, Madaba will be hosting this regional museum that will contribute to further development of Madaba and the community.
Hmm. Well, this theme that you're touching on of community engagement between the American University of Madaba, between the Madaba Regional Archaeological Museum project with Doctors Doug Clark and Suzanne Richard, who you mentioned, that is really an exciting theme, this idea of community archaeology that we've gotten the chance to explore here in a few of these episodes, and what I'm so excited to bring you on, because, I mean, you're right, it's not just about preservation or conservation for conservation or preservation's sake. It's about how these things continue to interact and are a part of the everyday life of the people of Madaba. And in that, everybody has a stake in protecting Madaba's cultural heritage, whether that be the shop owner or the restaurant owner or the hotel owner. It's an exciting theme that we've gotten to explore, and you're so right.
Yes,
And
indeed.
and I'm wondering, have you had a chance to explore? Let's see. It looks like the lights might be going off in where you are too. Have you had a chance to explore the 3D model that we've created of Madaba, or listen to those audio tours or those stories of the Madaba residents?
Yes, indeed. I had the chance, of course, to explore the 3D video because it's relevant to our project. And I was really amazed of the kind of work and the quality of what the colleagues did with the SciArc. And actually, I have found that this 3D model is really exemplary and is adding a huge value to what we do in heritage protection and presentation in Jordan. And I really enjoyed the interactive tours that were embedded in this 3D model, and also from the idea that, especially after the COVID-19 and the impact of COVID-19, how such kind of virtual tours and things to tell the real story and the genuine story of the Madaba people and the sites. So I really like the idea of how they use the advanced technology to present the sites. But most importantly, as you highlighted today, is the involvement of the local community on how they present their own sites, but yet their own stories about the sites. And even I like the idea of the interactive, that you move freely inside the site, you explore, like it doesn't leave anything that you would like to explore in the tour. It gives you all these chances to explore the heritage. But this could be like a good idea that in the future we attract people to come and visit these sites once they are more ready to be visited. But and also during this period, it was also nice to use such kind of tools for spreading awareness and enhancing the curriculum for the students, because we have discovered, at least in Jordan, that we don't have much of curriculum and online resources for the students to present to them the heritage for their heritage classes or history. So this was, I believe, a brilliant idea that we can congratulate the team for their work. And really, I enjoyed some of the colleagues that I know I didn't know, from the local guides and the local people who presented. But it's really nice to hear it from the people of Madaba, because all the time we hear such stories from professionals and archaeologists. But I always say that it's good to hear these stories as well from the local community itself.
Yes, it's so true that you know, these places, without sort of the context of what they mean to these people, you know, it loses some of its significance. And so the stories that we were able to capture, and there are so many other stories that we weren't able to capture, you know, it really brings this place to life. And I'm so delighted to hear that this tool has been useful and hopefully can continue to be useful as an educational curriculum, to really continue to bring everybody into sort of this larger community archaeology network of stakeholders involved in the protection of Madaba and Jordan's cultural heritage.
Exactly. And what is nice also to add, Paul, if you allow me, that
Yeah, of course.
the nice idea about adoption of such kind of technology is the involvement of a large segment of those who study, for example, ICTs and other types of architects and most people, because heritage is not only for heritage professionals or archaeologists. It's really a multidisciplinary thing that everybody has a stake in and has to contribute: local communities, children, public as a whole. So this is the nice idea about using such kind of tools, and this will open the door for a better valuing of heritage and understanding. So this is what I like using technologies, and in the future I hope this will continue to be replicated or upscaled for other sites in Jordan.
I hope so too. That's part of the plan. Well, thank you,
Yeah.
Nizar. Don't go anywhere, but if you're able to turn off your camera and mute your microphone, I'm going to ask Renad and Badie if you could turn on your cameras and unmute your microphones. Welcome, Renad. Welcome, Badie. How are you guys?
Thank you.
Good.
Great.
Great. Well, I'm so glad you both could join us. Renad, if we'll start with you, could you introduce yourself and the Mepi program that you participated in?
Okay. Hi, Paul. Nice to meet you. My name is Renad Al-Qurani. I'm a psychology graduate from the University of Jordan. Well, currently, I'm a Lazard Fellow doing my fellowship at Injaz. Well, I joined Mepi Student Leader Program in 2018. And that year, around 60 students from the MENA region did participate. 5 of them were from Jordan. So I was one of the luckiest students. We moved to Washington, D.C., well, the United States, to spend 1.5 months at 4 different universities over the summer, where we learned about leadership, human rights, democracy, and the most important, that we learned how to create our social movement. For me, I was at Georgetown University. That's where I come up with the idea of Circle of Hope initiative. And after returning to Jordan, I continued developing my idea.
Wonderful. And I'm really looking forward to asking you more about Injaz and developing a social movement and the classes that you took at Georgetown, where I also studied. So I'm happy to see a fellow Hoya here, and your Circle of Hope initiative. Bedia, do you want to introduce yourself and the Mepi program that you participated in?
Yeah, sure. First of all, it's my pleasure being with you today virtually and celebrating, in my opinion, a very successful project that gives Madaba, my hometown, the opportunity to be more visible through many stories and 3D modeling and the virtual tours using this high-tech technologies. Actually, I grown up in Madaba and I live in Madaba, and I graduated my high school from the Latin Patriarchate School, which is one of the important landmarks in Madaba because it was first established in the 1880s. It's around 130 years ago. For building the heritage and supporting the communities from diverse and different backgrounds. And after that, I went to the University of Jordan and graduated by holding a bachelor's degree in pharmacy. And during my studying years at the university, I went to the United States with MEPI program, especially to Portland State University, where I can describe it as a life-changing program because this is a very important program and initiative for the region because it enhance and grow the abilities, the skills, and the knowledge for the participants there in terms of different aspects and different pillars regarding the society. However, the most important, the values that you will hold after finishing and after and during the staying at the universities in the United States. Those values are mainly concerned about the the um, the impact on the society and building a very successful society and the grown up one. So currently uh, currently I'm continuing my postgraduate studies at the German Jordanian University in business administration, MBA, marketing stream, in parallel with my professional career as a medical representative and one of the international pharmaceutical companies. So I hope I answered the question, but yeah, perfect.
Great. Bedia, thank you so much for that introduction. And I'm so
Thanks.
glad that we could have the both of you on to talk about your experiences in Mepi. And it does sound like you sort of had similar experiences, thinking about, the process of how to build a social movement and taking these classes on democracy and human rights and building a society or a community. Renad, let's see, you mentioned the circle of hope. Why don't you describe that for us?
Okay, well, Circle of Hope, it's the initiative they established. It's will focus on supporting young people living mental healthy life by educate them about mental health concepts, how to maintain mental health in their everyday life, building empathy and fighting stigma in the community. So it's basically working in mental health with the youth and all over the Jordan.
Hmm. And is there a connection between that research and that work that you were able to do in those classes through MEPI at Georgetown and your work now with Injaz? Maybe you could tell us what Injaz is.
Okay, well, Injaz is a non-profit organization work in themes like unemployability, life skills, and entrepreneurship. So it's also basically supporting young people uh, and youth empowerment. Uh, so it's a little bit connected because some of the things that we used to taught in Georgetown University is the same thing that we give now to the young people at Injaz. So there's some topics that are related, yes, but in overall, it helped me during this experience at Injaz.
Wonderful. And Badie, maybe you could tell us a bit about your Mepi experience and how that led you to your work now and your pursuit of an MBA.
Yeah, so Mepi experience, it's a rich one. It's a rich experience where you learn things directly and indirectly. First of all, the classes that we've took in Portland State University was mainly topics about conflict resolution and knowing more information and building on the body of knowledge of the people regarding the democratic institutions also. On top of that, giving to the society by seeing local initiatives there, which was really insightful. And also on top of that, reviewing the headquarters of Mercy Corps, where we learned also about project management. This is the direct and the tangible ones, but the indirect is to really know how even with all the cultural differences, we're all connected in a way that that people also with the solidarity can build a community. And building the community, it doesn't take huge efforts at a time, but it can take different small steps forward by individuals, and all together can support the community and build a successive one. So I'm a person who always seek for growth and prosperity for the community, and such project that you've took place regarding Madaba also highlights the and it's consistent with the vision that I have.
You know, this is something that, I'm really excited to dive into now with the both of you is, unlike Nizar, who's working in cultural heritage very explicitly, I think you're both sort of thinking about these ideas of building community and sort of by proxy, community archaeology, and sort of this network of a whole community involved in the protection and preservation of heritage, but you're both approaching it from sort of different lenses. Renad, you're thinking about, or maybe, I don't know, are you thinking about cultural heritage from a mental health perspective and sort of like a sense of community and identity? I know we were talking about this before we started recording.
Well, one of the most important things to understand is culture is not only the material things. It's not the custom or the mosaic. It's a bigger concept. It's how the community is behaved, the community we're living with. It's what makes us as a people. So I think that cultural heritage is not just about preservation of the material things, but it's rather about safeguarding for a better life for people. And one of the most important things that we're facing nowadays, the identity crisis. And what makes this happen is that people are now living totally different life, or in somehow different life than their parents used to live. And this was that the new generation are feeling like they're not connecting to their parents, and they're not connecting to the community they are living with because they have a different needs than before. And because we always used to refer to the community to know what should we do and our behaviors, and to know what's the correct and wrong, all these changes that happen make us sometimes face lots of problems. And this is one of the things that we really need to focus on. Returning people to their culture and making them understanding their culture will help them more in understanding themselves and the future they're going to live. The second thing is that mental illnesses and the treatment that we usually use is really connected to the culture. Because, for example, if I understand the culture, I most likely will understand what's the main psychological problems they are may facing and how to support them, and what's the best approach of psychotherapy, which is really connected to the community and the people who's living there. So I think that the culture is really connected to the mental health, especially when we are talking about the importance of the community and how they should support each other. Um, so this is what I think about the culture heritage and mental health, and I think that cultural heritage is also connected to mental health in a huge way.
You're absolutely right that the cultural heritage of a place is much more than just the tangible material heritage of the place. The things that we were able to document and do the 3D tours of in Madaba, it's so much more. It's that intangible heritage. It's the living heritage of these places that we were, sort of able to capture in the model in terms of the stories that people told, or for example, in the interviews that we've done subsequently, and hearing, for example, from the tour guide Fuad Hamarni, who got married, in the Church of St. George. So, it has sort of this material importance to the community, but it also has this very important, emotional significance to him individually, and all the other people of Madaba who have sort of these similar personal narratives connected to Madaba. Let's see, Badie, I want to jump back to you. I don't know if you wanted to comment on that, or think about how you're thinking about your role in cultural heritage, and what you learned from your conflict resolution classes, maybe through the Mepi program.
Yeah, I just want to comment on a thing that has been mentioned. First of all, it's when we see the macro environment and the social environment in specific, in any place in the world, we're looking about three main aspects. The first thing is the culture, the subcultures, and the social classes that will define the macro social environment of the place. And giving back a look back to the history of Madaba, this indicates also how it's affected and it's reflected on all individuals who live here. Why? Because modern Madaba, it was founded in 1880s, early 1880s, with a number of families who moved and migrated to this area. And first of all, they built one of the most important landmarks, which is a school. And this school brings more and it highlights and indicates the importance of education in this place. So this is one. And the thing is about conflict resolution that you've asked. Conflict resolution mainly we're talking about the negotiations and the win-win situations between two different parties where there's a conflict. But the beautiful thing here in Madaba, and metaphorically, it's linked to the mosaic. Mosaic, it's consistent of different stones, and each one has its differences in shape, in color, in size. But when you look at them all together, you can see a big, beautiful picture, and that reflects the diversity. Madaba has a diverse demographics in terms of the people who live here during and as a result of the refugees and also the migrations to Madaba. So all of that together build a diverse and a beautiful community with the least conflict that might happen. Why? Because people here have this certain link to the land and to the history that their that it has been inherited by their grandparents, and how they were working to build this community so hard.
That is it's a beautiful narrative that's come out of these conversations of Madaba Mondays, is the diversity, but also the inclusivity of Madaba. Let me just get the lights. Oh, there we go. I've been thinking about and sort of struggling with the inadequacy, I guess, of the word community, because community doesn't, it doesn't sort of capture nuance. Inside of any one community, there are many different narratives, many different interpretations, many different people. And so, one heritage site inside of one place, inside of one community, um, there might be many different narratives depending on who you ask inside of this community. So maybe a mosaic or mosaic archaeology is a much better way of thinking about it, because I think it maybe allows for different
Um,
views.
yeah,
Go
I really got you and got your point, and that brings me back to the macro analysis of the environment when we were talking about culture and subcultures. Now, culture, it's a shared value among a number of people. Now, subculture, they have the majority. They share the majority of the values with the culture, but with some unique differences. And this unique differences doesn't make the the subculture, it's part of the culture, and majority of the values is shared. So that's why the different interpretation uh, and to what you pay attention to, how you cognitively evaluate what you see and what you hear, it gives different perceptions and different perspectives. But at the end, as I said, the diversity and the inclusion, it's two important values that um, that brings the people together in this community.
Renad, I want to give you the chance if you want to weigh in here, if you want to sort of pick up this thread of diversity and inclusion from perhaps a mental health perspective or a community and employability perspective.
Hey, hi, Paul. I'm really sorry, but I cut the connection. So if you can just repeat, like,
Yeah, of course, no problem. Don't worry about it. We've had a lot of technical difficulties today. I wanted to give you the chance if you wanted to pick up the thread or comment on anything that Badie just said about diversity and inclusion and multiple narratives within a single community, and perhaps how you're thinking about those things in terms of building a social movement or mental health.
okay. Well, I think that mental health is really important when we are talking about diversity, because sometimes when we are talking about the community, most of the time we usually look to like we're searching about the people who are really doing what we are doing or thinking in the way that we are thinking in. So if I understand your question clearly, so I think that when we are talking about the diversity in our culture, it's really important to focus on how our mental health is going through this diversity, and to be aware of how to control this diversity and be more acceptable for it, especially with this huge changes that happens in our community. So I think that it's like a combination between all the things with each other, and we should focus on all of them.
Mm-hmm. To bring this back to cultural heritage, before we started recording, you and I were talking about how, and you mentioned today, sort of this dislocation or this sense of detachment that young people are feeling in Jordan, and sort of coming to terms with not having the same opportunities or the same sort of connection to the land or their heritage in Jordan. Um, and it made me realize and sort of think about, which it's funny, I have to sort of remind myself, because as an American, I live in this sort of very young country compared to Jordan, where in Jordan, there are these incredibly rich archaeological sites and historic sites and intangible heritage, but inside of sort of a new nation state of Jordan. And I'm wondering how you're thinking about sort of, I don't know, bridging that gap, or if this cultural heritage can be a tool for sort of remedying that dislocation. Oh, let's see. We can't hear you. Oh, you're muted.
Okay, I'm really sorry. So what I was saying, and also I mentioned it before, that the cultural heritage is really important for our mental health. And I think what's make it more important is how we connect to our community and understanding our culture and how that make us feel of belonging and feel like we are referred to something is more bigger than our for example, family name. It's not, it's or it's just like a palace or something like this. So I think it's really important to think about the cultural heritage. Okay, just can you repeat because I think I missed the idea.
This sort of connection between mental health and maybe perhaps the role that Jordan's rich cultural heritage. I'm thinking about the heritage sites like Madaba, like Petra, like Jerash, these places that have existed, long before Jordan was a nation state. But that people, still, I don't know, do people feel a sense of attachment to, and what's sort of the attachment that young people have?
Yes, for sure. I think that they have this kind of attachment because, like, when you're talking with when any of Jordanians, they will be more proud of these places because it's actually what make them feel of like this is the place that make us, and this is what we have, and what we got through years. So I think it's really important. It's really important to have these places. It's making the identity of the people, and it's making them feeling of belonging. So I think it's really important to have this diversity of places.
Let's see. Before we keep going, this is pretty interesting. So Nizar, if you want to turn your camera back on and unmute your microphone. Hi, Nizar. I don't know, did you want to weigh in on any of these ideas that we've been chatting about?
Yes, I was enjoying the discussion actually, and for the many points my colleagues were raising with you. So just to add to the detachment or this attachment to the places, actually, as Renad also mentioned, every Jordanian is of course proud about the rich heritage we have, and even we have debates like what is really connecting us with these. Sometimes some people they call them irrelevant to our recent culture or our our living nowadays, because some people they say these are like from a Roman period or from a certain period that we don't really be attached to. But this discussion was even in schools is that because whoever, even the Romans who came to the area, who built these places, they are the ancestors of those who lived in Jordan. Of course, not Jordanians because we are a new country, but it's everybody who contributed. And this is bringing us to the idea back again. It's about the international heritage, and this is something universal. It's not about it belongs only for a certain people or even one local community. It matters everyone who lives on this earth, and because maybe the people that who came to Jordan lived and started the country here, or who moved to another places, every one of us has a footprint and our ancestors. So we belong to each other at the end. So whenever we travel and see any archaeological site, you see similar sites to what you see in Jordan or in Lebanon or Syria. So this is actually beyond borders, and this detachment shouldn't be really relevant whether like I live on this place or it is close to my neighborhood or not. And another important aspect I wanted to raise here is that sometimes this kind of heritage is bringing fear and a kind of the community and the people, they are afraid that this heritage could be a threat to them. Why? Because, for example, when it comes to confiscation, and when you have the government, they discover in an infrastructural project, there is like a mosaic floor or like a part of a site. So this is sometimes the people, they are afraid that sometimes the heritage is kicking them out of their homes and sometimes of their lands. And also we have witnessed this kind of detachment sometimes when you work on World Heritage Site nomination, because this is something really critical when you work with the World Heritage Center and UNESCO, and these, the rules of the buffer zones and the core zone, and how you make sure, because people are becoming afraid because they used to work liberally and with freedom and move a mobile and around these places and in them, and they cut what they need on their resources and use whatever they need. But nowadays, sometimes you hear these discussions from people, they are more sometimes afraid from heritage. Yes, it's an identity, it's a protection, it's a resource, but yet sometimes for people, even in Madaba, you have still some people, they live on top of archaeological sites, and you have some of them, they have partial mosaic floors, as we can see nowadays. So this is the question, is that heritage in itself, it is an opportunity, but also sometimes the people, they feel like sometimes this attachment or detachment, sometimes it's really critical to understand and to absorb nowadays. But with more policies and procedures, maybe an awareness, this kind of problem can be resolved. But I like the discussion that both colleagues were talking about, but it's really a sense of belonging. And again, the idea of valuing heritage and why we value what we have. This is something important to instill in the minds of from even the childhood and for the youth. So this idea that we hold as a people of Jordan will remain and continue to be for the future generations, instead of just focusing on the idea now for today.
And it's interesting, this sense of fear that you're describing, and also similarly, I mean, or maybe in opposition to that fear is a sense of pride, and I think that sort of gets at the inadequacy of the word community, and that there are so many different perspectives on heritage within a given place or within the borders of Jordan. So, this sort of leads me to the discussion that I wanted to have with all of us. We've talked about community archaeology, or maybe mosaic archaeology, and this idea of a network of trust and stewardship between classically trained archaeologists, university students, tour guides, concerned citizens, businesses, including restaurants, hotels, carpet and mosaic sellers. So, what do each of you see as your role in community archaeology or mosaic archaeology? Badie, why don't we start with you? We haven't heard from you in a little while.
The role, it's not only for Badie, it's not only for a single individual. The role, we all play it together. And as we discussed before, that maybe keeping that heritage in mind and maintaining and sustaining this heritage, and it's very important for the total city, because it's not only impacting the loyalty and the sense of belonging, but also it impacts the revenue and the income, and some people live because of that heritage and because of that archaeology. So and for example, at the level of tourism, the COVID pandemic posed a great risk on the income of those group of people, and it starts from the small mosaic shops and souvenirs, maybe, to the hotels and to the restaurants and to the big businesses. So it's all has been impacted. And in parallel, if you look also about the economic situation, and according to Petra Jordan news agency, it was recorded that Madaba has the highest unemployment rate in Jordan, which reached 28.3%. And this should be considered as a risk, because the high unemployment rates has a negative consequences not only on the socio-economic, but also on the psychosocial consequences that may rearrange the priorities of the individuals towards the basic human needs. So those threats could be handled from two main things and two main aspects. The first one is to maintain and sustain the cultural heritage. This is one of them. And the second thing is to give more attention to the small actions that benefits the whole society. And as for maintaining the cultural heritage, the efforts your efforts in this project was highly appreciated because it supports Madaba. And with this globalization and the internet connection, people can review this place. And with this beautiful technology, I'm sure they will come and visit it. It supports Madaba in terms of and becoming, and it makes it more visual with the 3D drawings and the stories in different languages, in Arabic and in English. So maintaining the heritage, the cultural heritage, it's considered very important because it also gives, it contradicts the negative consequences to a positive one, and it finds opportunities within the threats. So, and this will emphasize the sense of loyalty, and this also will distribute the level of responsibility on the community to keep Madaba the place that people here would love to stay in and be proud of what their grandparents have done for them. So the second thing, it's giving more attention to the small initiatives that positively impact the behaviors and the action. Why? Because it positively reinforce those small actions, and it also encourage them and motivate them and drive them to do more initiatives and to do more projects and to do more volunteering. And this also altogether, it doesn't only uh, for the benefit for the society, but also for the individual himself or herself, because they learn, they interact with the community, they scale up their knowledge, their skills, their attitudes. It all will accumulate together, and it will make a huge difference. So moving from the simple economics to the socio-cultural factors, to the cultural heritage, at some point it's all connected and at the macro level.
It really is all connected. And it's so interesting that you've identified unemployment as a threat to cultural heritage, because that's certainly something that we see, everywhere in the world, where when people are unemployed, then out of whether it be desperation or malice, people will engage in looting or trafficking. So then that makes me, the sort of next question that I have for you, Badie, is, if you're studying to get an MBA, what are you thinking about your role in protecting cultural heritage and, disrupting unemployment in Madaba or in Jordan to protect cultural heritage?
Yes, sure. Hala, for me, MBA and marketing itself, it's an art and science that mainly facilitate the exchange of value. So you can market a product, you can market a service, you can market a good, but also you can market a place and experience. You can market a heritage. You can market the culture. And this exchange of value can be there, and the marketing efforts should be enhanced and increased and supported to give to make the intangible beautiful experience more tangible for the people, to encourage them to come and visit it. And the second thing, that public relations and PR, it's a part of the communication, and the communication, it's one of the elements of the marketing mix to any product or service or place or experience. So in Madaba here, marketing efforts should be increased to encourage more visitors, to encourage more tourism, and this will impact the lives of people who live here, and it will increase not only on the revenues or the income or the tangible, but also on the psychosocial consequences that people will have. So marketing, it's very important. Currently, I'm studying and I'm building my knowledge in this place. But yeah, so those efforts, and as I said, that education, it's one of the most it's the fundamental pillar to propel any nation towards its success. And I believe that people who live in Madaba, and as I said in the interview, that the first landmark was the school that included theater and art. And this and the school, it wasn't only supporting the academic education for the people who live here, but also the art and serving the community with scouts and different activities. So I believe that we have the core, which is the importance of education as a community and as individuals, and we can build on it. And as I said many times, maybe every single and small effort will make the difference.
It's interesting to sort of think about it in market terms, that Madaba and Jordan has this incredibly rich cultural heritage, so it has a supply of cultural heritage. And I think Renad, what Renad has been getting at is that there's also a demand, that there's a demand in terms of what people are feeling, in terms of this sense of dislocation or despair, and maybe in some cases, for a sense of connection. And hopefully that can put people to work, and people will come and visit Madaba. Renad, so I want to come to you. How are you thinking about threats to cultural heritage, like unemployability, or maybe some of the fear that Nizar mentioned? How are you thinking about threats to cultural heritage?
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
So I think it's really important to bring this issue that most of people are facing mental illness, especially after COVID-19. The reasons of this mental illnesses come from those problems and those fears of people of unemployment, or not knowing themselves clearly, or their future, where they are going. So I think it's really important to highlight these problems when we are talking about the cultural heritage and the mental health. Because as much we work in making people understand their culture and how to know themselves and the belong of who they are, it will support us so much when we're talking about the employment and facing any other problems that may come for them. And I think all that will support us if we all that will help us to improve the mental health. So I think it's really important to focus on the cultural heritage, because it will lead us to reduce the mental illnesses and reduce the problems that we are facing in the culture. So I think it's all connected. It's really important to focus on all of them.
It's interesting that maybe the sort of permanence of cultural heritage, whether that be tangible manifestations of that cultural heritage, like Madaba, like Petra, like Jerash, or intangible manifestations, these traditions that sort of connect to the past and the present, that sense of permanence can be sort of a ballast or a counterpoint to the uncertainty and the fear that people are feeling because of COVID, because of unemployment, and those impacts on mental health. So Renad, before we leave you, how are you thinking about your role and what you can do?
Okay, well, I think that what I'm doing with Circle of Hope, where we using the culture to make people more connect to themselves and reducing the mental health illnesses, is really important. And also, I think that I play a role in supporting those young people, maybe building their initiatives and supporting them, doing an impact in their communities, and sometimes how to use the culture and what their communities are to build their initiatives and the programs. It's not like about just bringing in new ideas that doesn't fit our community, but at the same time, how we can use our culture to build social movements and work on this, especially that I'm supporting young people to build their initiatives. And at the same time, I think that I'm playing a great role in Circle of Hope when we support young people, because also one of the most important things that we're working on is the identity and how people can feel more connected to whom they are. So I think it's really important in this. And the last thing that I think that it's really important in my role is one of the main things that I'm working on is building an empathic community. And I think it's really important when we're talking about the cultural heritage, because people used to be more supportive to each other. So it's really important to work on this these days. We need the young people to be connected to culture, because it's was one of the most important things that support our parents and grandparents through years. And it's really important if you want to really supportive and like if we want to improve the culture and the community right now to face the social problems and the psychological problems. So I think that this is one of the things that I'm really interested in working in it with the youth.
Nizar, I'm going to give you the last word if you want to pick up this thread. In some ways, your work, is sort of the most directly related to cultural heritage preservation and protection. But I'm wondering if you want to pick up this thread of fostering a sense of belonging or identity or the threat of unemployment in terms of what you see as your role in community archaeology and protecting heritage.
Thank you, Paul, again. And I'm interested also for what Renad and Badie mentioned. And actually, this is why, as I mentioned before, the multidisciplinary thing is key here, because whoever is serving where, regardless if you are working with the government or with a donor or in a project or in a school, I believe each one of us has a distinctive role for heritage protection. But of course, sometimes when you work directly, like myself, with now with USAID, and how we as Jordanians can help to have a better shaped, let's say, strategy of donors, and how we can help each other to work together for a more, let's say, mainstreamed kind of assistance and work with the communities. So it becomes that the aid money, especially what comes with the most generous donor for Jordan is the US, is that how we can mainstream these generous donations and aid for helping the communities to flourish and help to protect our heritage. So I believe it's a big role actually in all of us as Jordanians to work together with our partners and make sure that we use these funds wisely, because sometimes it's about funding and financial support, but this is one part, but also it's about the decision-making process and how we select the right decisions in order to ensure that we have better protection for our heritage. So this kind of employment, and as all of you, maybe you know, that employment is a key aspect of assistance to Jordan, especially with the USAID support, and then the employment and work on job creation. And heritage and tourism, because 80% of tourism coming to Jordan is cultural tourism. So this does make sense that cultural heritage as a resource is a very good employer and a promising field for study for Jordanians. And this is why all of it does make sense that we all together work and to continue this aspect, because it's not only a couple of projects or like a short-term strategy to work on. This takes generations to continue, and this is why we still have these marvelous heritage resources in Jordan, because it comes from one generation to another. So we want to make sure that we have our print, let's say, and make sure that we, for our future generations, that we contributed one day to this milestone of protection, and to make sure that using technology or the continuing of this kind of work as a catalyst for future development, and to make sure that the future generations will keep seeing that the heritage is a value, is a key resource for them to protect. And look, as maybe Renad and Badie mentioned, from the threats, because this is when it comes to the government decision again, and to work on promoting more awareness. And this is our key role, is spreading the awareness, not only for the public, but also for the officials as well. Because this is the key aspect, how we can protect and preserve the heritage. And maybe most of you heard about the debate in Jordan now about Dana biosphere, and the idea of using and reopening the idea that they need to work on copper mining in Dana biosphere. So it's again that this is the importance, and how we can spread the awareness and continue to ensure that the value of heritage continues across generations. It's not like one day people will say, let's demolish this important resource because we will do mining in Madaba, or we will do this kind of new infrastructural work. Yes, this is an important thing, is that balance between development and protection. And this is why we always say that we as heritage professionals, we are not against development, of course, but development, just like to work on natural resources, it has to be sustainable development. It has to be the respect of the tangible and intangible aspects of heritage. So this is why it's key that our role should be that each one has his own or her own role to do, and especially when it comes to institutions and the public as a whole. So I believe that the key role is that also is how we can collaborate together. And Badie, maybe he mentioned this idea that we need to work collaboratively. We need to match resources and work together, because sometimes you see that there is a duplication or multiplication of efforts that we repeat sometimes each other. So it's more wise that we match resources, we work together, utilize what each one has, more networking, more work together as Jordanians and non-Jordanians. Everyone has a stake to play in and to contribute to. And also, most importantly, to build our kids and children to continue this message. Because myself, I keep talking to this point with my kids and taking them to these tours, not only to enjoy visiting Madaba or Petra or any location, but also to bring this kind of valuing with understanding. Because if we spread the word of understanding why we need to protect this, because it's important, then this is what will make a huge difference of people to understand why this pottery sherd is important for us to date a site, for example, or the mosaics, to understand how the previous, the old civilizations, they map without having satellite technology, for example. So these are all aspects of science, technology, and heritage in itself, how this is advancing nations. So this is why the discussion is really interesting to continue over.
Thank you, Nizar. Certainly one of the reasons why we've had this conversation is, I'm a big believer, and the State Department is a big believer, and USAID is a big believer in the power of cultural heritage as a development, as a tool for development. Sometimes, other means of investing in development, let's say investing in education, it sort of implicitly says you're not educated. Or investing in healthcare implicitly says you're not healthy. But investing in investing in development, in cultural heritage protection, says you have something special. You have something unique that is worth protecting and preserving. And I'm hoping that even though sort of the model of development that it comes, let's say it comes from the United States first to the government of Jordan and then sort of filters down, you still can have that bottom-up development and investment in cultural heritage, involving all of these different communities and all of these different sort of lenses for how cultural heritage impacts our lives.
Actually, I would add, if you allow me, Paul, to add, because you mentioned the bottom-up approach. I'm a believer actually in having a hybrid model of approaches. It is that we need to have the grassroots level of bottom-up approach, but also the top-down approach as well, because we need a mixture, because without having an enabling environment from the government and the relevant entities, we as the public as well, we will not be enabled enough to work together and to protect the heritage. So I think that it has to be a hybrid model that each one has to work on. You need to work from bottom up and then top down. And together, this is how SHEP even succeeded in the work in the different locations we worked in, because we worked with the government, we worked with the locals, we worked with every relevant stakeholder together. And the nice idea that they come together even for trainings. And this is why Douglas and the team, how they achieved this great success by working together with everyone. So I think this is the future that we need all together to work on this kind of assistance and protection.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It does have to be a hybrid model, because the role of government is to provide for regulations, to control for market failures. And so you need a friendly, but controlled in some ways, regulatory environment for development and businesses to flourish.
Exactly.
So we'll leave it there for now. Thank you, Nizar, Renad, and Badie. And I'd like to thank all of our past guests, Doctors Doug Clark and Suzanne Richard, the two archaeologists from the Madaba Regional Archaeological Museum, Bassem Mahmoud from the Department of Antiquities, Casey Haddock and Avi Fernandez from SciArc, Amy Hill from Story Center, Lindsay Durston, our virtual English language fellow, Jude Twal and Hannah Kupti from the American University of Madaba, who did the photogrammetry, Sam Twal, Fuad Hamarni, and Saber Twal, the tour guides who recorded the audio tour for the project, Khalib Oremrim Kusei Al-Shawabaki and Najwa Salim, who recorded the 3 stories that accompanied the model. And I mean, there are so many people to thank, who are a part of this show and a part of the project behind the scenes. We've had a chance over these past 4 months to explore a lot of interesting themes. The power of photogrammetry and storytelling to democratize heritage access beyond those who have the means to travel and visit heritage sites. The living heritage of a place, like songs of resistance and resilience that connect the past to the present and future. Religious tolerance and interfaith dialogue, like Christians fasting during Ramadan and Muslims celebrating Christmas, and community or maybe now mosaic archaeology. So I hope these conversations have caused everyone to reflect on their roles and our roles to protect our shared global living heritage. Thanks again for joining us. Bye-bye.